Got it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. And whether you're here live or whether you're watching this recording, you're in for a treat because Lon Safko is amazing. I use that word a lot. In fact, I got a message from somebody today and they said, and this was a compliment. It's like, you always tell everybody that they're amazing, but you're amazing. And it's like, well, everybody's amazing, right? But Lon is super amazing. And it's not just because he's from Ossining, New York. That actually has nothing to do with his amazingness, although I'm sure he learned a lot from just surviving the tough streets of Ossining, which, if you don't know, that's the home of Sing Sing Prison, the famous Sing Sing Prison. So when people say, go up the river, that's where you're talking about. Sing Sing Prison is up the Hudson River from New York, and so New Yorkers think going up the river means going to Ossining and not in a pleasant place. Lon fortunately grew up in a much nicer home in Ossining, and his parents treated him reasonably well so that he could get a good education. And then some things went totally wrong, and he became an author, and not just like a book. He wrote 24. Is it 24 or 25?
24. I'm working on 25.
24 books. And my introduction to Lon was one of his books called The Social Media Bible. And I think he'd already done a variety of things already up to that. But when the Bible came out, the other Bible, it was monumental. How many pages was that? I think 800 is in my name.
Over 800 pages. That's exactly right.
800 pages about social media. Like when we didn't even know what social media was, Lon was on it. And he talked to the founders of all these different social media platforms, of which most of them are gone or incorporated in. But at the beginning, we were all trying to figure out what this is all about. And why I bring that up is that's Lon Safko. He's always multiple steps ahead of the rest of us. And so that's why this topic and speaking with Lon is so important, because he's not just giving you what's going on, he's giving you what you need to know about the future. And that's ideally where we want to be, right? And be prepared. So Lon, really appreciate our long friendship. You are super amazing in all that you do, and really appreciate you talking about innovation today. How would you like to start out, and what's the best approach today?
Yeah, I could jump into the presentation. It's kind of fun, and it actually teaches you how to be more creative. So when everybody leaves here, we're going to be really, really smart.
I want that. I want some of that.
Okay. All right. Well, so let's just jump in. Thank you. Thank you very much, Doug. It's always a pleasure. You are truly amazing. I mean, you know that too. And I'm not just saying that because I owe you, but oh, shucks. Yeah, Doug and I have known each other for a better part of almost 20 years, at least 15. So thank you for having me here. Yeah, innovation and creativity now is more important than ever, especially when you're talking about marketing and building businesses and doing business internationally, because we all have the same tools. We all know how to use social media. We know what Facebook is, we know what Twitter is, and all its new derivations, X and Meta and whatever, but we all have the same tools. So the only thing that's going to give us a competitive advantage to make us more successful is to be more creative in how we're going to use those tools. So let me start this presentation. It's called Innovative Thinking, of course. And here we are. Okay. And again, thank you for coming out this early in the morning, everybody. I really appreciate it. Or watching this video.
It didn't show up on the screen yet.
Oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Let's try that again. We'll go back here. We may have to edit this part. Okay.
While Lon is doing that, I did forget to give kind of like a grand and glorious introduction. I would like to do that before we get going. And what Lon did, he didn't just give an intro, like he didn't give me like some points. He asked ChatGPT to give an introduction of Lon. So you got to hear this. This is really amazing. So ladies and gentlemen, get ready to have your mind blown by the one and only Lon Safko. So this is not Lon talking. This is ChatGPT. This guy isn't just an innovator, inventor, and best-selling author. He's a straight-up genius. He's responsible for creating the first computer to save a human life. No big deal, right? And has 18 of his inventions at the Smithsonian Institution. He's even been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, but that is just scratching the surface. Lon has pioneered everything from voice recognition and home automation to artificial intelligence and virtual reality. He's founded over 14 companies, has multiple patents to his name, and has written books that have sold over $2 million in retail sales. Oh, and did we mention that he's a member of Mensa? This guy is like a love child of Elon Musk and Albert Einstein. So sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired by the one and only Ossinings's own Lon Safko. I added the
Yeah, I love that ending. Isn't that hysterical? That was all Chat GPT. I just told him to go. It just put something together for this morning. If you haven't used Chat GPT, you got to do it. It's absolutely terrific. It's hysterical. Now, it doesn't necessarily add Ossinings's own, by the way. That was the other genius in the room here. That's great, Doug. Thank you for that. I just thought it was so funny when I read it. I had to send it to you. Okay, so you should.
And now it works. We see it.
See, there was a reason that it didn't work before, because we had to hear that illustrious introduction. Okay, innovative thinking and creativity. Seriously, during this presentation, we're going to talk about all the different facets, and I'm even going to give you a formula and some rules that you can follow to become more innovative. So there it is. Some little fancy tricks with the PowerPoint. Okay, ask a question anytime. Doug will try to stop me from talking. I'm a professional speaker, which means I like to speak and I don't like to stop speaking. So it's going to be difficult, but if you have a question, raise your hand, put it in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. At the end of the presentation, I'd like to give you one of my best-selling books, The Innovative Thinking Bible. It's about 350 pages just on innovation and creativity. And in the meantime, pay attention. This is cool. You'll walk away. There's really some good takeaways. So don't check your email or play with your dog or jump on YouTube or look at Facebook or look at those stupid dance videos on TikTok or trolling Instagram, tweeting, doing Sudoku. You know what I'm talking about. Focus. It's worthwhile. And there's my bio. You already heard ChatGPT. Okay, here we go. Invention. I want to talk about invention, innovation, and creativity. These are three words that people think that they know what they mean, but at the end of this presentation, you're going to realize that you may have a different opinion. The definition of invention is the act of bringing ideas or objects together in a novel way to create something that did not exist before. And no, I'm not going to read every slide, but I want you to understand invention is putting together things that already exist. Ford, when he created the assembly line, it was the first time an assembly line was ever used to manufacture automobiles, which dramatically dropped the price of the cost of an automobile. There were assembly lines being used in other industries, but never in the auto industry. So he took things that already existed and used them a little bit differently. Innovation is introducing a new idea from one's own imagination. Now, this is different innovation because if you look at Einstein's theory of relativity, yes, a lot of the physics were based on previous physicists and information of the time, but it was a unique and novel idea. So we can put things together in different ways, or we can create brand new things. And then creativity, this is tough. The ability to transcend traditional ideas, rules, patterns, relationships to create meaningful new ideas. Now, Jobs did that. He was really good at creativity. There was MP3 players. They were around. Magnavox and many other companies were manufacturing them, but he created this idea and he made us want an MP3 player, which eventually became the iPod, and then it morphed into the iPhone. So Jobs was very, very creative. A little bit difference between the three. Now, the three things that we're going to talk about here is how your brain messes with your head. Your brain actually has been conditioned in ways to keep you from finding solutions. from finding this creativity. And I'm going to show, if you can understand how your brain is hiding the information that you're looking for and stopping you from being creative, then you can take action to actually bypass that and become more creative. The second part, I'm going to give you an actual formula. It's a simple 3-step formula. Follow these 3 rules, and I promise you will come up with creative ideas. It works. And then the third part of the presentation, I'm going to show you tons of silly, fun examples of things that I've invented, not that I've built companies around, but if I can show you some really simple ideas, you can then say, well, I could have done that, or I've done something better than that. Yes, these are the examples that I want you to use to practice becoming more innovative. Okay, our brain, we're going to talk about, let's talk about Doug's brain here. Okay, no, we won't talk about, we'll just talk about them in general. There's a left brain and the right brain. The left brain really is the analytical one. It's the one that keeps us alive. It gets us back and forth to work. It gets us at this presentation at the right time. It's analytical. The right brain is creative. It thinks of objects, colors, ideas, and this is true. And the both sides communicate with each other. The left brain is working almost continuously, keeping us going through the day, listening to what I'm saying. The right brain then is put on hold, and we only get to hear what it has to say at certain conditions, and we'll talk about that. Doug, if you can have your mic on, what do you see here? What do you think this is an image of, or anybody?
Well, the first thing I saw was the bird, and then I saw the question mark secondarily.
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. And that's the way most of our brains work. The first thing you do is you see the bird or the Batman symbol or a ninja star. And the reason that we see that first is that we're always taught that the information is provided to us black on white. When you open up a book, a magazine, a newspaper, the information that's important to us is the black on a white background. So our brain has been conditioned to see that. Now, Doug, I told you Doug really is brilliant. So his brain says, okay, wait a minute, maybe let's take a look at it differently. Let's flip it 180 degrees. Is there white information on a black background? Yes, in this case, if you can see it, it's a big giant white question mark. But our brain doesn't go to that first. So this is a really simple example of how we've been conditioned to look for information one way when the answer is actually presented to us in a different way. Does that make sense? You can never have a book on black paper where all the text is printed in white. So we're conditioned not to see the answer. So let's take a look at 50 Shades of Gray here. There's 2 squares on this checkerboard. There's A and B. Anybody want to guess which is the darker of the 2? Is A darker or is B darker? Doug, you want to try?
Does anybody have any thoughts? What do you think, Barry? Are you there? Or Anita?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
it looks like B to me.
Okay. Anybody say A? Okay, well, let me just show you exactly what's going on here. There's the color A, and it's being spun over the color B. And look, they're actually 100% identical. Those 2 colors are exactly the same, but you would never believe that they're the same. And the reason is our brain, again, has been taught that if that cylinder is casting a shadow, it should be darker. However, we're looking at a checkerboard where A is deliberately a dark color and B is deliberately a lighter color. But you can stare at this all day and you will never notice that both of those colors are identical. Again, this is an example on how conditioning, living in the real world and using past examples will force real information, the real creativity out of our heads. Okay, let's take a look at this here. We have 3 cars parked along the side of the street. Images of cars. Which is the larger? 1, 2, or 3? Which is the larger image? 1. Everybody agree that 1 is the larger of the 3? Well, let's take a look at that here for a second.
But
What does Anita think?
What were you saying there, Nina?
What was that, Anita? We missed
I
you.
was going to say it may appear that way in the context of what we're seeing, but that may have to do with the perspective of the actual photograph.
Absolutely correct. You nailed it. That's right. So there's the image of number one, and all I'm doing is moving it down next to 2 or 3. So do you see they're actually exactly the same size, and that's almost impossible to believe when you're looking at that image, except for what you just said. Yes, the perspective. We always know that if something is further away, it should be smaller. In this case, when they were all 3 the same, the one further away should be smaller, but it's not. So we're saying, and our brain says, okay, so that it's going to be significantly larger. Again, if we're looking for a solution, if we're looking for a creative way to perceive information differently, we have to be very, very careful that our brain's conditioning is causing us not to see the right answer. So the better we get at this, the easier it becomes. Okay, wheels on a bus. This is a bus. It's parked at the curb. It's going to pull away. It's either going to pull to the left or it's going to pull to the right. Somebody tell me, which way is that bus going to pull away? Left or right? Anybody?
From what country it's
Yeah, United States, no tricks there. Typical US bus.
Yeah, you might say if you're in Israel, it might go to the left.
Yeah, this is a US bus though.
Okay, fine.
Good thinking though. I like that. That's getting out of the dots.
curb
Wow.
is.
Which way?
It depends on where the curb is.
It's adjacent to the bus.
Yeah, but if it pulled up alongside some other place to let.
Well, here's the funny thing. Almost no adults get this correct unless you're just doing a 50-50 guess. And that's fair enough. But you know what? 100% of school kids get this correct. 100% of elementary school kids know that the bus is going to pull. Here it comes. Watch. To the left. And here's the reason. School kids know there's no door. And if there's no door on that side of the bus, it can only pull away to the left. The door's on the other side. Again, yeah, I know. It's like, I should have known that. Kids know that all the time. They have no trouble with it. But somehow those types of observations have been conditioned out of us. And we don't see what we used to be able to see. Okay, here's another one. Does anybody see black dots?
Yes,
How many?
they keep moving.
It's a JPEG. It's not a GIF. It's not a, this is a photograph. It doesn't change.
I know, but my vision changes.
Very good. That's exactly right. It takes between 10 and 100 milliseconds for the neurons in your cones. You have rods and cones that are in the back of your eye. And when you see all of the black, those cones are stimulated with black. And then it takes 10 to 100 milliseconds for that neuron to clear that chemical. So as your eyes are bouncing around and seeing the white dots, your eyes are actually still seeing the black that was stimulated earlier until it clears itself. So this is an example, again, of physically not being able to see the reality because there are no black dots. It's a function of how our eye actually operates. I'm giving you these examples so that you can understand how we can overcome it. Okay, elephant, right? Typical elephant. Everybody look at the elephant. Okay, cool. Get the elephant to walk off stage. How many legs does the elephant have? Anybody? Well, the answer was 2. Many. Way too many. Here's another example. Anytime that we see something that we've seen before, our minds automatically assume that it's what we've seen before. And we never look any closer at it. So if you looked at this elephant, you probably could look at it for quite a while, but your brain says, okay, that's a standard elephant. No reason to waste any more computational time on it. And you move along, even though the image is right in front of you. And if you see it, the legs don't work. But we can't see that because our brains lock onto what an elephant actually looks like. Let's talk about the 3 C's. Now, those are just a few examples of how we get tricked. Now, the 3 C's, here's the secret formula. And this is what took me better part of 10 years to figure out. Yes, I'm really creative. I got 18 inventions in the Smithsonian, 30,000 of my professional records are part of the permanent collection, 14 inventions in the Computer History Museum. I have 3 US patents. It was like, how come you're creative? How does it work? Well, I'm going to show you. And it took me 10 years to find. I call it the 3 C's: collect, calculate, and communicate. Collect. What we need to do is put ourselves and our brains in a position where we're constantly collecting information about, now, not just a problem. Most of the time we use creativity to solve a problem. But when Steve Jobs created the iPod and eventually the iPhone, that wasn't a problem. Like I said earlier, those technologies were around, manufactured by other companies. So that's a fresh new idea. So it could be a new idea, or it could be solving a problem. So we put our brains in a mode of collecting, kind of like the 5 W's, which I'll talk about here in a minute. The second part of this is calculate. Our right brain is the one that handles images and ideas and concepts and colors. The left brain is analytical and keeps us alive. The right brain is the one that comes up with the creativity. So as a result, we need to allow our left brain to continually collect information, push it into the right brain, and let that right brain put that puzzle together. That's calculate. And then communicate. Now, this is one of the most important steps. This is very important. This is where we mess up all the time, is communicate. We have to allow our right brain to communicate those ideas, those solutions, that creativity over to our left brain. And I'll show you how that works. First of all, collect. We need to be eyesy. Use our eyes, use our ears, pay attention, look around us, search the internet, anything that we can do to gather information, because we're feeding that right brain. Most of the information is probably useless, maybe, but we don't know which is and which isn't, which could be part of that solution. So here's just one example. It's called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. Not Bernie Madoff. That's a completely different phenomenon. That's a whole different presentation. But in this one, if you ever wanted to buy that special purse, or you want to buy that new car, new truck, and you're thinking about it, you're trying to justify it, your right brain is collecting information. Whoa, all of a sudden, look at that. That person's got that same purse. Look at, there's the truck. That's the 3rd time I've seen the exact same truck I want, even in the same color this week. It's amazing. And it's all happened to us. That means that the right side of your brain is gathering this information and storing it and try to fit it all together. And yeah, we're trying to justify that expensive item, but even on less expensive items, even when you're just trying to solve a problem or create a new idea, your brain is collecting this information. So every time you get that feeling and you say, oh, look at there, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's your brain doing this Bader-Meinhof. Yeah, believe it or not, there's names for everything. Now, the 5 W's is really important when you're collecting information. It actually was invented and used by the New York Times in the late 1800s. New York was a pretty rough place, and Hell's Kitchen, and it was really bad, and the 5-star area, or whatever, it was pretty bad. So the New York Times couldn't send reporters in, because you couldn't send an Italian reporter into an Irish neighborhood or vice versa, or they'd get beat up. So they needed to get stories out of these different areas. So what they would do is they'd get these kids, usually 9, 10, 11, 12, and they give them a nickel, and they say, here, go into that neighborhood, get a story, and answer the 5 W's. And it's actually 5 W's and an H: who, what, where, when, why, and how. And what they knew is that if the kid came back and answered these 5 W's, that they had all the information necessary to create a story. Pretty clever. That's how we got the term cub reporter. They were cubs, they were children. So the 5 W's is also really valuable in collecting information, because it forces you to ask all the questions necessary to gather the information necessary so that your right brain can start putting together these pieces. But you see how easy it is? Who does it affect? Who's using it at the time? Who would benefit by it? Every possible way you can use the word who. When does it happen? When will it happen? Any way that you could ask the when question. Now, Sakachi Toyoda, with a D, back in the 1930s, used this throughout his entire company. And the result was he invented the Toyota automobile manufacturing. So the 5 W's is really, really important. Now here, the calculate part, there's not a lot you can do to speed this up. It's got to take time to put that puzzle together. There's a lot of pieces, and the puzzle pieces are all mixed up from different boxes, because some information is important, some isn't. So your brain has to have time to put together these different pieces to come up with whatever solution you're looking for. Now, there is one thing that you can do to speed up this calculate mode, and that's practice. Just like playing the piano, being creative is similar to playing the piano, playing golf, riding a bike. The more you do it, the more often you do it, the easier it becomes, the more natural it becomes to you. Now, here's the important part, and this is where we mess up all the time, and that's communicate. We have to allow our right brain to communicate those solutions over to the left brain, because then the left brain says, hey, look what we came up with. And now you've got these great ideas. But the problem is the left brain is the one that's running continuously. We never let it shut up. We never let it take a break. We're constantly feeding it with information. Now, let me give you some examples when we do give it a break. Have you ever driven from home to work and not remember a single turn that you made? Kind of scary if you think about it. That's your left brain completely handling it. Now, another way to quiet your brain, when do we get the best ideas? When do you come up with the best solutions? Anybody want to volunteer? What are you doing when you come up with good ideas?
Sleeping or very calming when you're like not trying to come up with it. It comes to you.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect answer. That's exactly right. When you're in a calm state, when you're in a quiet state, when you're not activating that left side of your brain, give me an answer, give me an answer, give me an answer. Let the left brain be quiet for a while. So when I present this to large groups, the answers that I hear is calm, when I'm asleep.
Motion detected at your
When I, next to my bed, on a nightstand, I keep a little pad and a pen, little Post-it notes, because often I'll wake up at 3:33 in the morning with an idea or a solution, and I'll forget it by morning if I go back to sleep and I write it down. So when you're sleeping, of course, when you're sleeping, is your left brain driving you to work, walking down a flight of stairs, doing complicated maths, working on a spreadsheet? No, your left brain is on hold. Now your right brain has this ability to communicate those good ideas over to the left side. And other things that I hear is in the shower. Yeah, left brain's on hold. Not a lot of calculations going on in the shower. How about exercising? You're at the gym, you're jogging. Absolutely. So here's the most important part of this. You have to give your brain some quiet time. Now, Maya Angelou called it her piddling time. Yeah, literally, she would go off in a quiet place and just think. Well, she wasn't really so much thinking as she was communicating between her right and her left brain. Today, we have so much stimulus with especially our iPhones. In the year 2000, Microsoft actually paid for a study to compare the attention span of a goldfish to humans. And goldfish had an attention span of 9 seconds, and humans had an attention span of 12 seconds. Well, they redid that same exact study in 2013. Goldfish didn't change. They were still at 9. Humans dropped to 8. So I could tell you scientifically, humans have a shorter attention span than a darn goldfish. So we've got to fix that. So if you want to be creative, shut your phone off. My phone, believe it or not, shuts off at 6 o'clock at night and does not turn back on until 8 in the morning. There's a setting that you can put on. I don't care what happens at night. If it's a family emergency, call my wife. Nobody in business is going to bother me. And my phone sits in my office all the time, not in my pocket. When I'm in the car, I do not listen to music. So here's a challenge. When you're driving today, turn off the radio, turn off all the sound possible. Just be quiet and listen to your thoughts. Sometimes you have to listen to the silence. Think about that. Yeah, sometimes you have to listen to the silence because that's when you're going to get your best ideas. So do that, please, as a homework assignment. Turn off the sound, turn off the noise. Just give yourself some quiet time. If you want, put on some meditation music. That way you're not following the beat, you're not singing along with it because that's all left brain. And if you do this, I promise, it really will work. You will come up with these ideas. They're already sitting in your head. So let me give you just some silly examples of creativity that all of us can do. And these are things that I've just done over the years, and I just thought they were fun to share with you. But they're giving you examples of, if I could do this, you could do this. Garden hose. Nothing ticked me off more than taking the garden hose off the holder and having it snarl up and twist and knot, and I'm pulling it, and it knocked over my fountain one day and broke it, and it just drove me crazy. So I looked at it for a second. I did the 5 W's, and I thought, why is it all snarly like that? Well, it's my fault. It's snarly because I'm twisting it in circles. Now, this happens with extension cords, it happens with ropes, it happens with hoses. You twist it and twist it. Every time you turn it around, you're putting another twist in it. So I stretched the hose out. I laid it over the holder this way, just looped it back and forth, nice and nice, no twists. And guess what? I never had a kink in my hose the whole rest of my life. I did this about 20 years ago. It was just something as simple as, okay, I agree, it doesn't look as pretty as the one on the left, but do you want pretty or do you want snarls? So yeah, the one on the right actually worked. And it was a simple solution. I thought, okay, let me do the 5 W's. And I realized I put the kinks in it. So if I don't put the kinks in it, it won't kink. Kind of silly, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it. Here's something I invented when I was in Phoenix. It's a hot, dry area. It's called humidivent. You fill it up with some water and you put it over the floor vent if you have forced hot air, or you can hang it on the wall. And as the forced air goes over that little reservoir, it actually evaporates the water and adds it to the air. Completely passive, dishwasher safe. It's made out of plastic. It's cheap. And you could even put some essence of oils in there if you want to scent the room. That's how cheap and inexpensive. So you don't need an expensive humidifier. You just put that on a floor vent. That's it. And it worked. Okay, wet mops. Everybody's got a wet mop problem. My wife came to me and yes, I use the mop too. I'm not being sexist. I mop the upstairs, she mops the downstairs. And she says, I don't know what to do with this mop. If I put it in the bucket, it sits there wet, turns sour, smells like terrible. And she says, if I put it on the floor next to the bucket, so maybe it'll dry faster, it still stinks and it messes up the floor. So what do you do with a wet mop? No matter how much you dry it out, it's still going to be wet, and eventually it's not going to dry and stink. So I looked at it for a while and I said, went to the dollar store, got a $1 bucket. And all I did was cut a V in the front of the bucket, and I used a screw and I screwed it to the wall about 5 foot in the air. Now, my wife and I, when we're done with the wet mop, we just take the wet part of the mop, hang it in the bucket, and let the handle hang on the side. The water drips off the mop down into the bucket and evaporates immediately, so nothing becomes sour. So that when you need it, you just lift it up out of the V and the mop is dry. See how simple the solutions can be, and sometimes silly? I mean, it was a $1 solution. Yeah. Here's another one, picking up leaves and stuff in the yard. Big problem. You rake it up, you try to scrape it into a garbage can or drag the garbage cans around. Again, went to the dollar store. I got a tarp. You grab the 4 corners. The problem with that is they slip out of your hand. One of the corners will slip and the leaves will fall at that corner. So I didn't like that. So I just took an ordinary hook and a piece of wood, and you hook all 4 corners. You can throw it over your back. You can drag it down the street and the leaves won't come out at all. It was just a matter of adding that hook with a little handle. And if you want to use it for brush, just use one end of it. It works. It was just a simple solution to something that bugs all of us. Now, this I'm going to tell you, this is one of my favorites. Sherry is my best editor. She's really good at logic errors and repetitive. And so she's really good. And she just edited the Innovative Thinking Bible. This is all true. And she called me up. She says, I'm going to send you a photograph. And I just got done with your book. So I said, what is it? She says, I just came up with this idea. She says, I have a sink that's similar to the one in the picture. And every time I wash my hands or a dish, I go to shut it off and my wet hands drip down onto the counter and it makes calcium stains all over the counter. So every time I turn off the faucet, which is often, I have to wipe the counter down. And she says, it's such a pain in the neck. She says, but I really love the design. So here's what she went to the dollar store and she got a plastic placemat. She bent it, cut it, put it underneath. And now every time she goes to shut it off with wet hands, the water drips down onto the plastic placemat. And because it has a little bit of a tilt to it, it just runs off into the sink and she never has to clean the countertops again. And you can get it in whatever colors and you can change it for holidays and it's $1. The solution was $1. But that to me was a really great testament that after she read the book, she came up with this idea. I think that's amazing. My daughter worked her way through college at Outback Steakhouse. And they got a lot of rules and regulations. It was really a good job. It's a good organization. And what they said was, it was at a time when the girls, women were wearing dangly earrings, big dangly, hoopy, kind of ornate. And she loved wearing those earrings, but they have a policy that the earrings cannot be any larger than a quarter. But she liked dangly, and that's not going to work. So I made these for her. By the way, those are exactly the size of a quarter. That's a quarter right there, 2 dimes and a nickel. Well, she wore those and she almost got fired. So I don't recommend trying to break the rules, but it's a different way of looking at things. If you're limited to a quarter, let's make some danglies out of a quarter. Just look at things different. Turn it around. Look at it upside down. Look at it backwards. This is the logo that's on the cover of the book. You can see the cover in the lower right-hand corner. Quite a while ago, somebody said, you know what, you are a round peg in a square hole. You just don't fit. And I thought about that for a minute. And I was like, first I thought, okay, it's kind of an insult. Yeah, I don't fit in to normal things. But then after I thought about it for a while, I was like, wait a minute, I fit quite perfectly. You got to look at it different. Turn that round peg 90 degrees. And if fits that square hole, absolutely perfect. Just a different way of looking at things. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to think that way. Have fun. Think of things, think wild things. Okay, tabletop fountains. We love that white noise. We love those fountains. About 10 years ago, tabletop fountains were huge. Now, another thing that I like are fish tanks. Also gives you the white noise. You get to watch the fish. How come no one has ever put a fountain on top of a fish tank? You got the water, you got the pumps. How cool would it be to have a waterfall trickling down a mountainside, an island escape, maybe with some mist, and it just trickles down into the fish tank? And you could make it out of vacuum formed plastic. It'd be really inexpensive. Plus, fish can't get out. Why not put the two together? This is the way I think. And it's actually called random association. Showerhead. We all have that kind of a shower head. And if you don't, you got to get one, because you can rinse parts that you can't rinse from the ceiling or from the wall. Let's put it that way. You can get into, let's say, nooks and crannies. But the thing is that when you're soaked up, you need one hand to hold that. You need one hand with the soap, and you need a third hand to scrub off the soap. Now, if you have somebody who's willing to help you while you're taking a shower, I strongly recommend that. But if you don't, why don't we do this? Why don't we take vacuum attachments that'll snap onto a shower head? Now, I'm not saying literally vacuum attachments, but why not have a loofah or a brush or a soap dispenser that actually snaps on? So if you're scrubbing your back, you put on that brush and you can exfoliate your back or wash the soap off your arms. Simple. That's called random association. Take one thing that's been around, like Henry Ford, and add it to something that is also around, but put it together in a novel way. My wife's car about 10 years ago broke down on the highway, and we had these little triangles. The problem with those, or any of those warning devices, is that the first time a semi-truck goes past it, it blows them over, knocks them down, they go flying up the freeway. But you don't want something big and heavy in the trunk of the car carried around, because you never really break down. So I came up with this idea. Remember when you were a kid, we had these punching bags, had a little bit of sand in the bottom, and you inflated it and you'd punch it and it would flop over and pop right back up again. Why don't we make highway cones like that? They come in a little pack. They're only 1/4 of an inch thick. They're small, they're light. You blow them up when you need them. You put it on the highway, a truck comes by, it blows it down, pops right back up again without any trouble. And then when you're done with them, you just simply let the air out of them and put them back in your trunk. I thought, yeah, that'd be kind of a cool idea. Emergency cones that they weebles wobble, but they can't fall down. Why not? See, silly, but it makes us look at problems and life differently. Leaf bag dilemma, especially in Phoenix and here in Southern California, when you're trying to force leaves and palm branches with stickers and, oh my gosh, bougainvilleas, man, those things will kill you. And you're trying to get them into a plastic bag, you know that's not going to happen, because the stickers will just jam up the bag. So what I did was I took a cheap plastic garbage can. I cut the bottom off with a little saber saw, and I put the bag on the outside of the can. Now I can jam bougainvilleas, I can jam in palm branches because they scrape along the plastic garbage can, not the bag. Then when I'm done, I just lift the can out of the bag and pow, put a tie around it, in the garbage it goes. See, use the garbage can upside down and use the outside of it, not the inside. Okay, here's another one. Granddaughter was 8 years old, coming over to Phoenix for Easter something, spent a couple of days. And if you ever had an 8-year-old kid or know one or been around one, you got to keep it occupied. So we got lots of coloring books. So she sat down one morning about 10 o'clock and said, hey, Papa, I'd like to do a color for you, color in a page. Yeah, let's go pick one out. We sat and we picked one out. And then just before she started, I said, this is really important to me. I know I'll do a really good job. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to color outside of the lines. Now, I had no idea what that meant or how she would take it. And my mother, her grandmother, my wife, looked at me like, you're messing with her head. She's going to catch fire. Stop doing that. No, I said, let's just see what happens. Well, this isn't the original. The original wore out. It was on the refrigerator. But she took a regular coloring and she took the brightest, most vivid colors, and she outlined every single one of the black lines. And the contrast between the black, the white, and the vivid color, it actually pulsated. Now, the next time you're at a restaurant, ask for the coloring crayons, because they always have that, and try it yourself. Absolutely amazing. So here at 8 years old, when I told her color outside of the lines, because of course everybody, the other grandparents tell her to color inside of the lines, because they must care more about her and don't want her to have brain damage. She didn't know that you couldn't do that. So she figured it out because the conditioning wasn't there. We weren't conditioned not to. Okay, here's another one real quick. Real estate. A friend of mine was in real estate. He says, can you design me something, some kind of a marketing piece? So here's what I did. On the back of his business card, he has that chart. The reality is nobody cares except how much you're borrowing, what's the interest rate, and what my monthly payment is. And it comes down to monthly payment. That's all they care about. So if you put this on the back of your business card, it's a mortgage calculator and it fit on the card. I had lunch with him about a year ago and he reached into his wallet and he pulled out this wrinkly old beat up business card from 20 years ago and put it on the table. I said, what's that? He said, I just sold a house to this person whom I've given a business card to almost 20 years ago when you designed it for me. He still had that in his wallet and I sold him a house. Yeah, that's what I want to hear. Because that's all you care about. What's my monthly mortgage payment? That's going to be based on how much am I going to borrow and what the current interest rate is. So think outside of the dots. Do the 5 W's. What's important to a buyer? It worked. Okay, last one. Then we'll open it up for questions. Can you create $1 million idea? Yeah, I've done it a couple of times. So how do you do that? Okay, I'm going to give you an actual example. When I had left Phoenix, I came over to San Diego and I became the director of marketing for the Port of San Diego and San Diego International Airport. Everybody hated the Port of San Diego. The citizens hated them, so much so that they would egg the employees going to the cars at the end of the day. So when I got in there, they said, you got to turn it around. We need our citizens to like us. I said, okay, what kind of a staff? Well, you don't have a staff. Okay, well, what kind of resources? No, you don't have any resources. Well, what kind of budget? No, we don't have a budget. Oh, okay, that's all. Okay, sure, we can solve that. So I was thinking, okay, how do I create a marketing campaign that can draw the citizens in to make them friends? And I realized you got to go after the kids. You steal the kids, the adults will follow. I didn't mean steal. If you entertain the kids, the adults will follow. And I learned that by working with Apple, because in the early days of Apple, they put all the apples into the elementary school. Brilliant, Steve. Brilliant. You got them in elementary, you're going to want them in middle, you're going to want them in high school, and eventually you're going to want them on the job. Yeah, that was brilliant. IBM sued them for doing that and stopped them from doing it. They said it was unfair competition. IBM won. And McDonald's, they got the habit trails or the kid thing tubes that the kids can play in. My daughter always wanted to play in those. So her and her friends, I take them all out on Saturday. Get the kids. Okay, so I'm going to go after kids. What are we going to do with kids? Well, we're going to do something that's fun. So we know that if we get the kids, we've got the families, parents, and the schools. So 5 W's. What do kids like to do? And you can answer this to yourself. What do kids like to do most of all? Well, they like to play. Of course they do. Okay, so we've established that they like to play. And by the way, if you followed the three C's, you could have done this too, because none of this is rocket science, as you can see so far. Okay, so what do kids like to play with? Well, they like to play with toys. They like to imagine. They like to fly airplanes and play with dolls. And okay, oh, toys. Look at there, that pops up. So now I have to market to kids and I have to give them toys, but I don't have any kind of a budget. The only marketing medium that I had access to was the internet. I redesigned their website and I won. It was funny. I won the best website for any port authority for the Western Hemisphere. It was the largest award for this half of the earth. Completely ridiculous. But I had the website. So I have to, how do I give kids toys over the website? So I'm thinking about it for a while. Okay, I'm going to use the internet. That's cool. Now, we also know that kids want tangible. They want things that they can play with, blocks and dolls and trucks and cars. So how do I create something tangible? So I'm looking around. This is true. And I see my computer hooked up to a printer. Wait a minute, doesn't printers take information, electrons, and turn it into paper? It actually creates a tangible representation of whatever was on the internet. So I said, wait a minute, can I use the printer? So yeah, okay, so printer. So here's the solution. I have to create a tangible toy for kids to play with that can be distributed over the internet. Okay, that sounds kind of ridiculous, but when you think about it, watch how this happened. So the first thing that I did is I created a Boeing 737. There's the picture, the very first one I made. And I went to United Airlines and I said to United, I said, look, I'll provide you with this toy for a kid. It's a simple PDF, 3 pages. They print it, they cut it, they glue it. Half hour later, they actually have an airplane that they can fly around. How cool is that? And how cool is it that it looks exactly like a United Airlines airplane? They said, we love it. We'll put it on the website and we'll pay you 10 cents for each download. Good. So that was my first contract. They called me at the end of the month and they said, Mr. Safko, we're sorry, we can't honor our agreement. I said, why? He said, well, because of the downloads. I said, well, you're only paying me 10 cents. And they said, yeah, but we had 750,000 downloads. I was like, okay, I'm on to something here. So I created a company. It's called Paper Models Inc. And if you'd like, go to Paper Models Online or Paper Models Inc. And you'll see what I'm talking about. We have over 100 products. So here's the elevator pitch that eventually came out of this. And then I'll show you the answer and then we'll open it up to questions. What if I could create a specialty advertising product similar to a t-shirt or a coffee mug with your marketing message and logo on it, which we can change every 15 minutes if you want, which you can't do with a t-shirt and a coffee mug, where your customers will represent all demographics, men, women, and children, rich and poor, across all cultures and ages, will actually ask for it, not like the coffee mugs that all end up in the garage sale that you got for free. And I'll handle the manufacturing and the fulfillment anywhere in the world. I'll do 24/7, 365, and I'll deliver it instantly every time someone asks for it. I'll fulfill it and it'll only cost you 10 cents and you're interested. That was the elevator pitch to United Airlines. And eventually, here's some of the other companies that I pitched it to. 21 California missions, all architecturally true replicas of the missions. There's the Smithsonian, Spirit of St. Louis, NBC, Independence Hall. We did a thing in the bottom center is Ford Motor Company. We raised $5.3 million at a fundraiser, and they were the centerpieces. The Apollo, General Motors, I did multiple contracts, 2 Malibus, a Silverado pickup truck. I've done Kia. I've done, the Princess Diana 747, did it for British Airways. And then we have all these school projects. The store has now been running. Now this is crazy. Believe it or not, I'm in my 24th year. I have had an e-commerce store running continuously for 23 and a half years. Can you believe that? I haven't met anybody who has done that either. It's kind of ridiculous. But over that period of time, I've had over 60,000 customers and it generated over $1 million in revenue. Is that insane? Just by answering those couple of questions in the previous slides. And it's called papermodelsinc.com. So the moral of the story is We all have the same tools. We all have this creative ability that's been in us since we were children, but it's been conditioned out of us. I want you to get around that conditioning, be aware of it, think differently, look at it backwards, look at it inside out, like the trash can. Put the bag in the outside of the trash can and turn it upside down. I want you to turn your problems upside down and look at them completely different. And we all have the same tools. The only thing that's going to set you aside from everybody else is how you use those same tools. How do you use the same tools, but just use them more creatively? And that's the challenge that I'm going to leave you with here this morning. Doug, thanks.
Very,
Mike
very
on. There you are.
Hey, great. What questions do people have? Either just unmute yourself. I'll bet you Anita has a question or a comment. That's pretty amazing. Huh?
I have several. First of all, you can only tell you're from New York twice. You put an R at the end of area. You say area, which is very common. And one of your vowels, I think you said terrible or something, you make it, you open it up a little bit more.
Yes.
When I think of prisons in New York, I think of Attica. So I know I've heard of Sing Sing. How lovely to have it as your neighbor growing up, but that wasn't what comes to mind to me when I think of prisons in New York. Let's see, my creative ideas come to me when I'm cleaning litter boxes. I used to have 7 cats, which means I had a whole lot. I won't use the actual terminology I used years ago. But yes, so that's my downtime, and it's usually thinking of things that are animal related. So I have like 4 or 5 projects I'm currently working on, and actually through the Global Chamber, I found somebody who can now help me get the mock-ups made and all that other fun stuff. So shout out to Global Chamber. Thank you very much, Doug. Pael up in Northern California is going to be, working with her on that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So one of the things that occurred to me when we were looking at the question mark thing, I know that the black and white has a lot to do with it, but it also comes with thinking outside the box or coloring outside the lines, because you force justified where the question mark goes, and we're not trained to think outside the box. And so if that same color combination had it totally fitted within the parameters of the box, everybody would have gotten it, but not everybody's thinking outside the box, literally.
Good point. That's a really good point. I'm going to remember that for the next time I do that presentation. That's excellent. Thank you for that. You're right. Very good. Doug, keep an eye on this one.
She's dangerous in a good way. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Sword in his side.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Anita. Any other questions? Just unmute yourself, since we've got a couple minutes anyway. Yeah, one of the things, Lon, while we're waiting for anybody else to ask a question around innovation, a few weeks ago, I met a guy named Rami Goldratt, who is the son of Eli Goldratt. And you may know, he was the one with Theory of Constraints. So he was the one, he wrote the book, The Goal, in 1984, which is one of the most, over 10 million copies sold. It was instrumental in many manufacturing and logistics companies on finding constraints and designing systems that were focused in on throughput rather than just like people were cutting. This was like a scientific way of cutting through it. And brilliant guy, very educational. The way they're now applying it to innovation. And the way Rami defined innovation was effectively removing limitations. And so and I think when you were talking about it, it relates to our paradigms, that the paradigms get in the way, right? We don't know that there could be something that comes along that saves time, like the cell phone or other things that have saved us all sorts of time to be able to get stuff done. We couldn't have imagined it because the current reality was in our face. And so is that the dilemma you were talking about, where basically the left brain is dominating? The left brain is the reality. And so it's hard to get past that current reality to see what that other solution might be to remove all that crap.
Absolutely. See, I told everybody Doug is brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that you nailed it. And let me give you an example. Back in 1978, I taught a computer to speak. In 82, I taught it to actually hear your voice and follow voice commands. And then in 85, I taught it to turn on lights and appliances. And by 86, I invented the first computer to save a human life. And the reason is there were 54 million quadriplegics and disabled people in America that couldn't turn on their own lights, and they wanted to die. So I took all these different items, I invented pieces to connect them together, and I had a computer system that would allow you to make an emergency phone call, or just make a phone call, or to turn on a light, or change the air conditioning, or raise your hospital bed, or read the Bible, or any of hundreds of things. And I built a company around that in Phoenix for the longest time, in Tempe. And the problem is that when I demonstrated this in mid 80s, let's just say 85 to 1990, nobody knew voice recognition. I mean, they'd seen it maybe on Star Trek, but they knew that it was a gimmick. They knew that it was just for entertainment. So when I would present this, everybody was in awe and would wow and standing ovations, but nobody bought it because they couldn't comprehend that it was real and what it could actually do. So in the late 70s, early 80s, I had voice recognition that nobody cared about. I had voice synthesizing. I had home automation. I had the first virtual reality operating system. I had the first chat bot. And it was all just entertainment because they could not comprehend, even though I kept telling them that someday it's going to be in everybody's pocket. And that they didn't understand. And it took 35 years for people to say, wow, yeah, well, I got that in my pocket now. Sure, of course. I mean, what else?
We get stuck in our paradigms, and those are comfortable for us. And so I see Barry, you joined back in, and we're right at the top of the hour. And Barry, I thought a lot about you while Lon was talking. I presume you probably had a meeting at the 1:30.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
A lot of what Lon talked about today are things that you worry about and think about and help people with. What I'm very curious on what your reaction was on what the part that you heard.
Well, here it's so great, Lon. I appreciate it. I love the brain science part of it. And the thing I'm dealing with is maybe the reality you and I see is totally brain generated. So there isn't any blue sky out here. That's a function of the brain and the agreement of all the brains of seeing a blue sky, because it's really particles moving around. And that's not good news for human beings, because it says maybe it's not your life, right? As a sidebar, but I can totally get the frustration of trying to bring something new into existence makes a difference, and nobody can hear you, because that's what I'm dealing with in the work I'm doing.
Really
Frustrating. But it's the way it is, and someday, I don't know, it'll shift. God willing.
5 years ago, I put a presentation together. It was called and I still do it. It's the 4 acronyms of the apocalypse. And I did that to get people's attention. It's AI, AR, VR, and IoT. Does anybody know what all 4 of those are?
Oh my God.
AI, AR, VR, and IoT. AI, artificial intelligence. AR, augmented reality. VR, virtual reality. And IoT, Internet of Things. I invented some of the first Internet of Things back in the late 90s, even before there was an internet. Same thing with AI and AR and VR. I've been involved in VR for virtual reality for almost 20 years. So I was warning everybody 5 years ago that AI in particular was going to change our lives. And everybody's like, yeah. We have a little bit of AI in Netflix. We got some in our car that keeps track of stuff. And they humored me, and it was almost humiliating. And then this morning, we kicked off the presentation with an entire introduction written by artificial intelligence. And it's in everybody's life right now. But for the last 5 years, nobody cared.
Nobody could hear it.
Are there ways to accelerate that process, and what are they? The example that you gave with the children, I thought was brilliant in a way of you're basically accelerating on a mark. I mean, that's marketing is accelerating people's uptake on something that you want them to be part of. And so I presume those are the kinds of things that leaders need to use, right? Of how do I get more people involved? I've got to trick them with marketing, or all marketers are liars after all, right?
You had a thought?
Or do you have some thoughts about how to accelerate?
Oh my God, I don't know. The truth is, I don't know what it would take. It just people have to discover it on their own.
That's why I PO'd it to you, because I don't either.
And if you did, you'd sell a book on that and make
Yeah.
a couple of money. Excuse
That'll
me.
It first. Yeah.
That'll be 5.
One quick thought I was thinking about that came to my mind when you were talking about left brain versus right brain, and it's something I talk about in when I'm moderating meetings. Is it, people think they're multitasking, but they're really not. You really can't do 2 things at once. And it's just a constant. I used to say, it'd be like you're volleying back and forth. So it starts here, it goes there, back over under the right circumstances, which is where the calm comes in, where give it a chance to work at it, for God's sake, and then throw it back there and let it go. But you have to give yourself the chance to let things percolate, as I like to refer to it.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly, you nailed it. That was a perfect explanation.
Anita, I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, Anita, you're absolutely right. You can only do one thing at a time.
Mhm.
Now, there are millennials or the next generation that can go real fast back and forth. They've been able to demonstrate that, but you're right. Unless you can be fully present with what's in front of you, you're not going to be as productive. I do work in that arena too. So it's really well said, Anita.
Thank you. It's being present. And when I was 20 and 18, I always thought I could multitask as well. We were all that way. We're a couple decades past remembering how it was, but it's the same thing. They'll slow down eventually and they'll realize that they can't. And the reason why this whole thought about it is always present is that I hate you're recording this, so I won't use the word. I do not like the chat feature on Zoom and stuff. You cannot be reading somebody else's chat and giving attention to the person talking. It's rude. And it also pops up in front of somebody's picture. So if there's some person that was talking, the chat box may pop up in front of them, or it may block some really important information that the presenter's giving. And I am just so anti-chat boxes. When I do webinars, it's disabled.
Good for you.
Wow.
Yeah, especially when the chat has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
You know what, Anita?
Afterwards, are we so instant gratification, like sycophants, that we can't write down somebody's name and find them later? Which is another thing. People need to start putting at least their first and last names on their chat, on their Zoom things, so people can try and find them afterwards. Like nobody
We'll
helps
track
anybody.
you down.
Help them.
And you know what, Anita? It's dangerous too. If you're working, like say, on a chemical, platform, and you're starting to look at your phone or text and stuff, and you're doing your work, you could die.
It is.
Work.
Yeah, we've got to get that under control.
That tough reality. Yuka, I see you're chatting right now. Are you able to unmute yourself and say hi, and any reaction to what you heard today?
I don't know if I'm presentable or not. But
That's okay.
hello,
We're all not
you.
presentable.
Of course you are.
Yeah,
Beautiful as
thank you.
always.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation, because I am really into innovation, and I truly enjoyed, and thank you very much for planning and executing this webinar. And I'm always ahead of time, and I saw what you said, like people don't get it, and the market is not ready when innovative company throws the product into the market. iPhone, iPad, they knew when to throw it, but most of the things I saw, they crashed because the market was not ready. So what is the solution for that?
Well, Jobs was really good. He was really good. I have a lot of respect for him. He was not a good person. I've met him, I've worked with him. He was not a nice man at all, but he was a brilliant marketer. He had the ability to convince the public that we had to have whatever he was selling. When he created Macintosh, it had so much sex appeal. It was so different than everything else. He sold us on the idea that if we bought it, we were going to be different and we were going to be better than everybody else. So he actually changed market perspective. And when he came out with the iPod, there was lots of MP3 players, but he made it sexy with that little thing that, oh my gosh, that little dial thing, that touch thing. He added something to it and he told us we had to have it. We couldn't live without it. If we didn't have it, then we were idiots. And we believed it. And then he did it with the iPad and he did it with the iMac and he did it with the iPhone. And he was really good at convincing us that we had to have what he was selling.
Now there's
good market ready.
something else to Yucca, is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that I can't remember his name. It was Charles Dubois or someone like that that said, nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Because idea's time has come, you create a context of whatever that be. You know, one of my colleagues created a context of ending hunger, you know, as a big issue in the world. This was 1997. So essentially hunger ended as a major issue, not because of, you know, wars and all of that. But if you create a context of whatever it is that you're out to accomplish, the context is decisive. It will go in the direction the context will. It might take 30 years, like I'm saying, it might take 5 years, but a context is very powerful.
That's a good observation.
You communicate it widely.
And
like an extension of the old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah,
it's kind of the same thing.
True. Yes. Okay, Doug, we're going to wrap it. Yeah, we're 8 minutes over.
Yeah, we'll wrap it. And what makes me think of the frustration that you're expressing, and then I'll turn it over to you, Lon, for any final comments, is that some of the people that I most admire are those that have a vision and they're perseverant and they somehow find a way to be resilient through all of what, Barry, you mentioned, is it just people are so slow on the uptake. And the one of the most impressive people for me, we talked about last week at Global Chamber, and that was during Nelson Mandela Day on the 18th. And I'm actually just about through his autobiography. And I read the autobiography because the 27 years he spent in prison, I figure, oh my God, he came out and he actually, instead of becoming bitter, he became better and he got all the changes he needed to do. But in 1948 was the Nationalist Party for South Africa came to power, where they started to implement apartheid. And so two things happened that night. One is he had been out with his talking intellectually and they thought this would never happen. Well, it happened. They read the paper the next morning and they were all like in shock, like, oh my God, this is terrible. 1948. It took 46 years from that point to him leaving prison and starting the new government. And the stories of what he went through in those years, the battle of those 46 years, are beyond comprehension. What he had to endure, not just those 27 years in prison, but even before that, and how he was treated and spit on and worse. It was horrific. And yet he persevered and found a way to come through and then change all of that. And so he's unusual, right? Or Candy Leitner, who has her 13-year-old daughter killed, and instead of in the moment being bitter the rest of her life, starts Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And so those are aspirational people who create from whatever issue they have and crisis and situation to create something better. So Lon, thank you for all of the examples that you gave of, I mean, a little bit less, the Leaf one is a little bit less than Nelson Mandela and Candy Leitner. However, you know, at the end of the day, those are the kinds of things that we can have an impact on a daily basis. And you've been able to do that. Please give us any final words that you'd like to say. Really appreciate all of the things that you've done, your presentation and time today, and you're just an extraordinary fellow.
Well, thank you so much. I'm proud to be associated with the Global Chamber. Doug, you've done an amazing job. Every time I meet new people that are associated with the Global Chamber, they're just absolutely amazing. And I'm really, really proud that you gave me an opportunity to speak. I just want to leave you with this, whether you're watching this live or if you're watching it recorded, you can do this. You can. The 3 C's are simple. Just play the video a couple of times. That's why I gave you lots of examples. You don't have to start out by inventing the iPhone. That's okay. Simple things are great practice. It's like when you learn the piano, you start with scales. You don't start with Mozart. You can do this. Everybody's got it in them. We just kind of got a condition. We lost our ability to connect with it. So let's reconnect with it. Let's be innovative. Let's be creative. Let's be happy. And if you want any more information, just go to safko.com, SAFKO.com. That's it. And you got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And Doug, thank you again, sir.
I started a notepad about a month ago. And I like that idea. And I like, Anita, your concept around, the fact that multitasking so often gets in the way of these kinds of thoughts. For me, it's my bike. If I'm on my bike, and I think scientifically they say if the visual images of what you're seeing are changing, your brain is a little bit more stimulated. And I am assuming that's why that happens, instead of just looking at a blank wall. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe I have it wrong, but at least for me, the changing of vision, whether it's going for a walk or going for a bike ride, allows my brain to work a little bit better. So thank you, Lon.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Ciao.